Hi everyone, as we move from preparing for a midterm to preparing for the final exam where you'll have essays, our friend Lainey is back making a racket over there drinking her water. But as we move from an emphasis on answering the short questions that you have on the midterm to a combination of multiple choice questions and also essay questions, I want to take some time to discuss something. You've probably seen a little bit of this in the materials. You may have heard about it. You may have attended some sessions in the past. I used to do this thing called brain training, and I'll continue doing it, but for this term I haven't been doing it. As we move forward, so for example, there's a review of the Lopez material that involves the use of this sort of formula. As we move forward, I want to make sure that we've done at least a little bit of this. So I'm going to do just a couple of short videos, very brief, very surface level discussion of the structure of legal reasoning that we test you on. This is something you'll see in this video and the next one. I'm not going to focus just on constitutional law, because this part of what we're going to talk about is not about constitutional law. It obviously relates to constitutional law, but it's not about constitutional law. It's about legal reasoning in general and how to get through law school, how to think your way through a legal problem. As I say in all my brain training sessions, you can go through most law schools, all 3 years, and never hear the words deductive syllogism. And that's a heck of a thing, because deductive syllogism is what we are testing you on. It is the structure of legal reasoning that it's the entire ballgame. In terms of logic and reasoning, it's the entire ballgame. So I don't want to get through all of Con Law 1 without talking about it. We don't reason as lawyers. We've talked about this. We don't reason from the gut. We don't rely on opinions, just opinions that we've developed from our own life experience and anecdotally. We don't think we're entitled to opinions, and we certainly don't argue with volume and repetition. Those are the things we do not do. What we do is we develop arguments that we hope will persuade courts, whether the judges or juries, to agree with us and our client, and that's what we do for a living. There are other types of reasoning that lawyers do as well, but deductive is mostly what we do in terms of the arguments that we put together. They're usually follow deductive logic, and certainly as in terms of bar preparation, you will not be asked to do inductive reasoning and things like that. You'll be asked to do deductive reasoning. That is, you know the rule, right? You apply it to the facts and you reach a conclusion. Now, the deductive syllogism was invented, so to speak, by Aristotle. And I'm going to put up here the famous example. I have gender neutralized it and tweaked it a little bit to get it in the format that's most useful for law students. The famous example says, if you took philosophy, certainly you've heard this. Aristotle was asked whether Socrates was mortal. Socrates was so wise and so smart and all this, so people were asking, is Socrates even mortal? And instead of answering that with some kind of ethereal or unanchored, unmoored answer, from the heart or from the gut, Aristotle said, well, to answer a question like that, we have to use logic. And like lawyers, he started with a rule, and his rule was all men are mortal. Like I said, I've gender neutralized it, right? Obviously men and women, all people are mortal. Now you ask, what makes that a rule? And here, if we were in a brain training session, we'd be going back and forth and I'd ask you about this, but we don't have that here. So I'm just going to kind of tell you, right? What makes that a rule? All men are mortal, so if you're a person, then you're mortal. What makes that a rule is it is a general, think about this, when you're looking at a case, what's the rule? The rule isn't the holding, the rule isn't the facts of the case, the rule is the general proposition that applies to the case, but not just that case. It's a general proposition that applies across the board to all similar cases. So a rule is that, it's a general proposition. Rules are usually proscriptive or prescriptive. They tell you what to do, what not to do, what's allowed, what's not allowed. Rules can also define simply the way it is. But those are rules. Those are general propositions that apply in all cases. Also, they are the principles that, when you apply them to the case, determine the outcome. Obviously in conjunction with the facts. Speaking of which, okay, so here we start with a rule. This sounds familiar, right? The structure of thinking. We start with a rule. We apply it to a set of facts, and the facts that Aristotle was applying his rule to, the facts were that Socrates is a person. So now think about that. If you accept the rule that if you're a person, then you're mortal, that's a general proposition that applies across the board. By the way, I'm not trying to offend anybody's religious sensibilities. I'm just using Aristotle's example. If you accept the rule that if you're a person, then you're mortal, and you accept that Socrates was a person, think about it. Look at that third sentence. That's a conclusion. So we have a rule, facts, and a conclusion. Now this is a very simple example, but it's an example. If you agree with the rule, or not if you agree with it, if you accept it, and if it's binding precedent, you would have to, that if you're a person, then you're mortal, and I tell you Socrates, that's the person we're applying the rule to, is a person, do you have any choice but to accept the conclusion that Socrates was mortal? And if you're sane and rational, the answer to that question is no. If you accept this statement of the rule, and you accept this statement of the fact, you must accept the conclusion as accurate. And I'll end this very short video with this question. What position do you want a judge in when you leave a courtroom? I don't know about you, but when I leave a courtroom, I want the judge to be in a position of saying, I have no choice but to agree with you. Your statement of the rule is accurate, your statement of the facts is accurate, and given your rule and the facts that are in front of me, I have no choice but to rule in your favor. You'll see this happen. Sometimes a judge will, and you'll see that this happens all the time. Judges issue opinions. I just read one a couple days ago from a district court in the John Bolton book case, where the judge clearly didn't want to rule in favor of John Bolton, said as much in the opinion, right? So you'll see this. The judges say, I don't want to rule in your favor. I don't like you. I don't like your client, but I have to rule in your favor, so I'm going to. So this type of logic, deductive argumentation, is absolutely crucial. You need to master it. You need to know how to match the parts up so that you form what we call in logic a perfect or a strong argument, and use that to your advantage. So in the next video, we're gonna talk about why is it that when you read this construct, if you're a person, then you're mortal, Socrates was a person, Socrates was mortal, why you have to go along with this argument. Stay tuned for the next one, and stay well.